The desert is still dark, but Giza is already awake. For a long time, people talked about slavery and chaos. What you see here is method, teamwork, and routine. Today, you are going to follow an ordinary worker, from the first step before sunrise to the real weight of moving stone. I only ask one thing. Watch while hunting the small details. Rope, sand, markings, calloused hands. That is where the story shows up. The Great Pyramid gives you that feeling of, this can't be real. But it does not come from a miracle. It comes from organized repetition. Around 2,500 years before Christ, this runs like a state operation. People, food, tools, and time moving in a steady flow. It is not everyone doing everything. It is task division, checks, corrections, and the same process repeating day after day. Once you understand that, the pyramid changes its face. It becomes less mystery and more engineering applied to routine. Before the stone, there is the village. Mud brick houses, narrow lanes, smoke rising early, bread on the fire. Waking up here has no poetry. It has purpose. Everyone knows what to do, and fast. Prep food, organize rations, gather tools, leave at the right time. The worker we follow is not preparing for a great destiny. He is just stepping into the routine. And that is what makes it real. The monument begins on an ordinary day, inside a simple place. The first meal is direct. Bread, onions, dried fish, a light drink. Sounds like too little. Then picture what comes next. Hours of hauling, dust, and heat. Here, food is not a detail. It is part of the project. There is distribution, measurement, and people whose job is to keep the line moving. If supply fails, the build fails with it. And that is what people forget. To move stone, you first have to keep people standing. The walk to the site is its own scene of organization. Groups move together, tools on the body, ropes on the shoulder, supervisors watching the flow. The pyramid grows on the horizon with every step, and the worker feels it without anyone explaining it. You know that moment when you arrive somewhere and think, okay, this is bigger than I expected. It is that kind of impact. And when the base appears up close, you cannot pretend. Today is going to be heavy. At the site, everything becomes a role. Cutting crews, transport crews, measuring teams, record keepers, repair hands, food runners, healers. It sounds obvious, but it changes everything. This is not a mess. It is a system. The worker steps into a machine that is already turning. And here is the key detail. When everyone has a defined job, effort goes further, and risk drops a little. It does not vanish. It becomes manageable. In the quarry, the stone is persuaded, blow by blow. First comes the marking, then the cut line, then the stubborn repetition. Hard stone hammers, copper chisels, dust rising without pause. The sound becomes the landscape. The sun climbs and the heat tightens. The worker is not creating a perfect block. He is turning stone into part of a flow. And that takes patience, technique, and muscle, all at once. Separating a block is not just breaking it loose, it is controlling the weight. Lever in the right spot. Support so it does not tip. Avoid cracks. When the block releases, rough shaping begins. Trim the excess, true a face, make it transportable. Precision inside heavy labor. And the worker feels the danger up close. Big stone does not offer second chances. A mistake here costs time. It can also cost people. On the sledge, the enemy is friction. Wood on the ground, rope pulled tight, a line of men hauling in the same cadence. The first pull is always the cruelest. The sledge resists. The rope bites the hands. Breathing turns thick. Then you understand why supervision matters. If everyone pulls off beat, nothing moves. The worker locks into the group rhythm, adjusts his steps, changes his grip. Here, coordination becomes strength. There is one detail that changes everything. Wet sand. Dampening the path ahead reduces friction and makes the weight answer more easily. It is not a trick, it is practice. It is the kind of thing you see and think, that is simple and it is brilliant. The worker feels it in his shoulders immediately. The effort stays massive, but it stops being a pure fight against the ground. That is how the site advances. Small solutions carrying gigantic results. Once the block starts moving, the worksite becomes a control system. Supervisors set the rhythm. Measurers correct the line. The team adjusts tension and pace so the sledge does not dig in or drift off course. Safety here is not the absence of danger. It is reducing error where tons do not forgive. The worker learns to pull on cue, wait for the signal, react fast when the load shifts. Before we continue, try a quick game. In the next minutes, count how many different jobs you can spot. Then comment which role surprised you most. It helps choose the next everyday history we rebuild here. On the ramp, everything gets harder. The incline taxes the body and the system. That is why there are rest points, not for comfort, but to keep the crew from breaking mid-climb. A sip of water, a thin strip of shade, shoulders reset, then back to it. The worker stops only long enough to continue. It is brutal and it is smart. A project this big cannot survive if the human body collapses before the shift ends. Injury here is not rare, it is part of the cost. The difference is that there is treatment, cleaning, bandaging, setting, watching. Evidence of healed fractures suggests it. People got hurt and they returned. Not out of heroism, but because there was need and support. The worker feels the wrap tighten, tests his hand, takes a breath, goes back. You have seen how simple care can decide whether someone lasts a few more hours. Here, it is gold. Now the air changes. The block is bigger, the path is tighter, and the margin for error shrinks to almost nothing. The team reinforces rope, adjusts the route, wets the sand with extra care. The worker takes position and knows it. This is not a normal haul. His body shifts into alert mode. It is that moment when you think, if this goes wrong, it goes wrong for real. That is why everything turns quieter, sharper, more controlled. The sledge hesitates. The weight sticks. The ramp offers no mercy. For a few seconds, the whole day feels tied to that rope. The response is immediate. More water on the sand, a line correction, posture adjusted, force applied on the right beat. The worker nearly loses his step, then recovers without letting go. No one cheers, no one talks. The block climbs slowly, stubbornly. And when it finally moves, relief shows up the way it always does after real danger. Heavy silence, brief, then the work continues. After the climax, there is no, now it's done. There is review. Check the rope, inspect the sledge, tighten the wood, confirm the path, fix drift before it becomes failure. This part is not flashy, but it is everything. Without maintenance, the system breaks. The worker uses the moment to lower his breathing, ease his hands, reset his body. The pyramid grows because the site does not only push forward, it stops to correct. A dull tool slows everything. A worn rope snaps. A loose sledge becomes an accident. That is why the workshops matter. Someone braces wood. Someone repairs fiber. Someone renews the copper edge. It is less visible, but without it, the build stops. The worker passes through and understands it immediately. There is no pyramid built by rope pullers alone. There is a full chain functioning from repair to record. Food returns, and not out of kindness. The body has to keep producing. Quick distribution, simple portions, a light drink. The worker eats almost without stopping, sometimes while walking because the site cannot clog. You can feel the logic behind it. Lines paced, jars refilled, baskets organized. The monument's scale depends on this too. You cannot sustain tons of stone if you cannot sustain the people. At certain moments, work brushes against ritual, not as spectacle, but as discipline. A brief gesture, a priestly presence, a passage space that reinforces order and meaning. The worker slows, lowers his head for an instant, then moves on. It fits what the site shows everywhere. Organization is not only technical, it is social. The pyramid is engineering, and it is power and belief operating together on the same ground. The higher you go, the more exact it becomes. It is not enough to bring the block up there. It must arrive aligned, angled correctly, ready to lock into a sequence that cannot lose coherence. Measurers and assistants make simple checks, constantly. The worker feels the shift. Less margin, more focus. This is where the pyramid reveals its precision. It is not just volume. It is controlled repetition. From here on, small errors get expensive. Much of what we know about these workers comes from the ground. Village remains, food areas, burials, bones marked by strain, fractures that healed. That evidence challenges the idea of a structureless workforce. It points to organized routine, steady supply, and practical care for the people holding the project up. The worker we follow stands in for that real story. Anonymous, repetitive, heavy, and essential. The name disappears, the trace remains. The trace changes the narrative. The light shifts, and the sight shifts with it. Long shadows, hotter air near the ground, dust glowing in backlight. The rhythm continues, but the body is at its edge. The worker holds the rope differently, walks differently, breathes differently. And in the lower sun, the pyramid looks even bigger. The contrast hits hard. The monument grows while the man shrinks under fatigue. And still, the work continues. Not because of one heroic day, but because of hundreds of days like this. The end of the shift is not just leave, it is collect, count, reset. Ropes are stored, sledges pulled off the main paths, records closed. That closing order prepares the next day. The worker coils rope with exhausted hands, fixes what needs fixing, steps out of the line. There is no show. There is routine sealing itself shut. That is the signature of this site. Even finishing is part of the method. The return is slow. In the morning, the walk carried energy and direction. Now it carries weight. The worker moves with the group. The pyramid falls behind, and the village rises as the only natural destination. His body is coated in dust. His hands burn. His shoulder complains. And still, the path is familiar. Repeated so many days it becomes automatic. The site fades from view, but not from the mind. Tomorrow comes again. That is what makes it real. A monument is not born in a day, it is born in routine. Back in the village, the priority is surviving the damage. Eat, drink, Check wounds, change bandages, rest. Simple, direct, no romance. The worker sits, chews slowly, holds a cup with both hands like he is running on empty. You know how after a brutal day, even standing up feels like work. That is this. The night is not celebration. It is repair. Without repair, the project stops, because tomorrow the body has to answer again. When the noise dies down, the pyramid becomes something else. In darkness or twilight, it looks bigger, more abstract, more final. The worker looks and does not see mystery. He sees the whole day. Rope, wet sand, cutting, hauling, bandages, bread, dust. A physical memory.
Just a reminder, these images are an AI reconstruction based on evidence and research.
The pyramid is often told as a symbol of royal power. In that quiet glance, it is also a portrait of ordinary labor that almost never makes it into history. More than 4,500 years later, the Great Pyramid still stands. Yes, it represents a pharaoh, a state, a vision of permanence. But it also represents ordinary people. Workers who woke in the dark, ate fast, pulled tons, got hurt, got treated, returned to their quarters, and repeated. Most of their names vanished. The labor stayed. And maybe that is the fairest reading. The pyramid is not only a monument to power, it is a monument to organized effort, people sustaining the impossible through everyday life.